get into the advanced, which is great. Um, but just to understand that you don't feel overwhelmed or obliged to get like you're inferior because you don't understand Koine Greek or why this ancient text has something in the margin, right? I mean, most of the modern translations, things that are made after the Dead Sea Scrolls were found they've made corrections. They made corrections once the Dead Sea Scrolls were found and the newer stuff. And so if you're reading an NASB and NIV, I did check out Tagore's NET for real quick while we were sitting there. If you're reading these modern, scholarly translations, you're just fine. Okay. Okay. You're not being run amok. Okay. So so I wanted to get that out there because we do have, newer people that are watching online that might think that if you just hear this for the first time, you might think you need to throw away your NIV, right? You might overreact to this information, and that's not necessary. And you do also have to trust the Holy Spirit. So today's message, and this is going to be nice and long, and we're going to have lots of discussion and maybe even have to eat our food in this room, right? Because this is really going to prompt you to think, okay? But the topic is miracles don't produce faith. And this is a kind of a pretty audacious statement. But for anybody who might be skeptical about that, we have a scripture right here on the board that proves that miracles don't produce faith. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the convictions of things not seen, for by it the men of old gained approval. By faith, we understand that worlds were prepared by the word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things which are visible. When you require miracles to believe, you no longer have faith, you have a transaction. You have a transaction that I will give you, God, my faith, if you prove to me that you exist. That's not our faith. That's the faith of the people who threw virgins into volcanoes. That's pagan faith. Pagan faith is when you actually have to have a transaction, and it puts the believer in the driver's seat. Yahweh is not out to prove himself to us. He wants us to accept him based upon what we see with our two eyes. Now, this doesn't mean that miracles are bad. Miracles are, we're going to talk about them, we're going to define them, and we're going to explore why they're used. And I've seen them in my life. I've seen miracles. I've seen people healed or cancer go into remission. Most often, the miracles I see are things that took a long time to develop. Like, for instance, my life's goal was to join the Navy and live in Southern California and have bonfires at Bolsa Chica Beach with Corona. And that's what I thought my future was. That wasn't my future. My future was to move to Kansas City, which I didn't know where that was when I was a young man. I had no idea. And when I called my wife and we got the opportunity to move to Kansas City, she said, I don't care where we move as long as you buy me a house. That, that, and that's why we live in Kansas City. There was no way to have a life out west. If you owned a house in 1995, you were instantly had a net worth of 500,000 plus the house you owned. But nobody could buy the house. You could borrow against the house. And that explained why everybody had these houses with Cadillacs and jet boats in front of them and just normal houses, the houses that the people who built planes for McDonnell Douglas lived in. My sister lives in one of these now. Very humble, 1,600 square foot built in 1953 in Long Beach, California, is now worth over $1 million. Laughable. There's no way drywall and boards are worth $500,000, a million, right? There's just no way that's true. So if you owned one of those in 95, great. If you didn't, How are you ever going to get one? So we moved out. And that was part of Yahweh's plan because the same time the opportunity came to move out away from our family is when I started reading the Bible and realizing that we couldn't do the pagan holidays anymore, which took us away from our families. Those of you who learned this in living next to your families, I don't know how you did it. My family drove 1,300 miles to force us to keep those holidays. And, they were strident and they were whatever. But so that's a miracle. The miracle that what I thought I wanted to do in life and what Yahweh wanted me to do in life, two different things, right? So miracles happen. And I look back and I see Yahweh was providing. But what does the Bible say? Romans 1:16 through 17. For I'm not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first and to the Greek. For in it the righteousness of God is revealed from faith to faith, as it is written, but the righteous man shall live by faith. For what does the scripture say in Romans 4:3? Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. Our father Abraham was credited as righteous because he believed something that God told him was going to happen without a second thought. Right? He just believed. In Genesis 13, Yahweh told Abraham that he would make his descendants too many to count. Abraham, then called Abram, made an altar. His reaction was to make an altar to God. Back when they made the altars out of just uncut stone, was basically saying, I believe you, and I'm going to make an offering to say thank you for making me that promise. His instant reaction was, yes, Yahweh's going to do that. He didn't give it a second thought. So the foundation or genesis of righteousness is faith that God exists and things will happen that you have no proof or tangible evidence will happen. Works matter a ton because our works are a manifestation of our faith. We in this room believe that Yahweh is God and Yeshua is his son, and they intended for us to get together in the fall for 8 days, and we're here. Do you have any proof that you need to do this? I don't have any proof that I need to do this other than the word that they gave us. They said, you're going to do this. And so we read that and we plan out our year to go do it. That's faith. And it's great when we have a bunch of people at the feast, and it's great when we have a handful of people at the feast. But just like Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, even if it's not great, you still take yourself to the feast because Yahweh said to do that. And he said to keep Shabbat, that we're not going to work. We're not going to make anybody work. And we're going to get together from Friday sundown to Saturday sundown every week. What do? We just do it. Our works are displaying our faith. It's not, he didn't say, if you do this, you get a gumball. That's operate conditioning. That's being taught something in a transactional fashion. That's how we teach our children the difference between hot and cold. We have to prove stuff to them. But the word says for us to get together and live by faith, which obviously this group of people does that. And everybody who's keeping Sukkot is doing that. They're living by faith because they are observing the appointed times when we have more than no evidence. We have evidence of the rest of people who say they believe in Jesus keeping a different set of holidays and telling us not to do it. And we're like, no, we're not going to do that. So faith is manifested in works, which is something that is unique to us. It's unique to people who believe like us because we believe that works matter heavily. Romans 1:18 through 20, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness, because that which is known about God is evident within them, for God made it evident to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so they are without excuse. This chapter is condemning people who deny that our God, the God of Abraham, created the heavens and the earth. And it is very condemning towards people today who don't believe there's a God at all. Because we should be able to see with our own two eyes that this is a creation. And the world is convicted of unbelief today because they reject what they see with their own two eyes. Um, the planet was clearly made. When Paul wrote this, he was speaking of from a very primitive perspective, not from 21st century scanning electron microscope perspective. He was a tent maker who got carted off to Rome on a ship, right? Okay, very simple. And mountains, streams, rivers, seas, the animal kingdom, humanity's ability to communicate with each other, beings made male and female and being able to reproduce, like kind coming from like kind. These are all evidence of a creator. As science progresses, we get the concept of entropy. Entropy is defined a couple of different ways, but entropy in the realm of science means that chaos increases. That if you have a jar of marbles that you put together and you say the red, white, and blue pretty marbles that you put in a jar, if you drop that on the ground, it is never going to land. It's going to shatter. They're going to scatter. It's never going to land in a neat pile that you made. Entropy means chaos increases. So from the Big Bang Theory, they say from nothing, there was an explosion that went out and chaos increases as the solar systems and the planets spread apart. That order came from nothing. That order came from disorder. That goes contrary to scientific law. They believe that this planet didn't just come from nothing, that it was accidentally made, that we accidentally spin at exactly the right RPM, at exactly the right distance from the helium plasma at the center of our universe, on exactly the right tilt, in order to have exactly the right atmosphere to shield us from the UV rays, but let us have the rays that produce life. Do you understand how incredibly impossible that is to be an accident? Okay, that would be like if you dropped the marbles on the ground and it landed and became the Taj Mahal. Okay, that's not going to happen. But in science, you're taught entropy. The girls are in university now. You're taught that this is a scientific law. And then in the next breath, something came from nothing. That's not true. Well, they're without excuse. His invisible attributes are clearly seen. The one thing that struck me from a child, because I grew up in Nevada, is where the copper is. Because the planet is a spinning ball with molten lava on the inside. Why is the copper 7,000 feet in the air if the ball is, if it's spinning? How can that be? Right? Take copper's a dense metal. Drop that into something molten. Where is it going to go? Go down. It's very simple. Why is that? Why can we mine these minerals, these heavy metals that we can just get with maybe 200 or 300 feet of digging? That shouldn't be possible. It should be, if it was an accident, a molten, well, it is a molten planet. It should be layered out in the order of the molecular weight of the elements. They should be separated out, but they're not. They're mixed together. That's not an accident. Science progressed further. The discipline that I spent a lot of time in is called photonic spectroscopy, where you would take elements apart in their wavelengths of light in order to quantify them so that you could know how much sodium, arsenic, selenium, thallium, lead are in aqueous solutions. Aqueous solution is a big word for water, right? But not always water, all right? Or we would do it in oils, right? If there was a process, there was AGP plant north of me made soybean oil. for salad dressings, and they would run that soybean oil through our machines to make sure there weren't too much contaminants in it, through the processes of purifying it, that there's no rust, no iron, no manganese that gets into there. So as as a young man without going to college, I was hired by a company that makes these things, and they taught me physics and chemistry, and it is incredible how ordered this universe is. It is so incredible because arsenic emits and absorbs light at 189 nanometers exactly. Sodium emits and absorbs light at, well, I have 589. That's strangely too similar to the other number. So I might be wrong on that one. Okay. But they're very far apart. So if you take a solution, which I would have done in my days, to calibrate one of these machines, we would have water and we would have these standards of sodium and arsenic and selenium. Down, take a pipette and you put it into an aqueous solution and you feed it into the machine, and it would produce peaks, that peaks of light that I would then, as the repairman and the builder, would get into the tank and turn a little window to make it dial in at 189. And if I dialed in arsenic at 189 and then I fed it sodium at 589, sodium shows up exactly where it is supposed to be. This is made by huge, perfectly machined things called a Roland circle. It's a big, looks kind of like the insides of a piano, and it's got little photomultiplier tubes out at different places, and then there's little windows in front of it, and there's a grating. Grating is a piece of glass that has these finite lines in it, and we would hit the lines with the light from a plasma, an argon plasma cutting torch. That's what we were using to atomize the elements. So we would take the elements and shoot them into this Tesla coil, which has an argon plasma, which would then make the light, and then we would filter out the brightness of the plasma and have the light show up. And as me, I'm studying the Bible while I'm learning this job, saying, can you believe how ordered this stuff is? Every element has a MIT table of wavelengths that it emits. It's completely reproducible. It is completely quantifiable, and there is no way that's an accident. There is no way that you can look at this and say that out of chaos came this incredible order. And why am I using light? Anybody think why I just spent 5 minutes explaining the physics of spectronic photon spectrophotometers? In the beginning, he made light. Yahweh ordered the universe with the first thing he made. Let there be light. We think it's just the white light. I have a grating at home that I should have brought, but I didn't think about talking about this till I was here. That if you shine the projector at it, it throws a rainbow on the wall. It takes the light apart and puts it into its orders and its wavelengths. When he made light, he didn't just make white light. He made what I just described. We get light from these as a chemical reaction in the fluorescence, right? Now we have LED lights. What is giving off the light is the bimetallic compound that's being forward biased inside of this encased thing, and then they'll put filters on it to make it yellow and red and blue. But the light is order. In the beginning, he's ordering the universe. So there's no way this is not true. And then to take it another step further, it works in molecular weight as well. When you move into mass spectrometry, mass is meaning the mass of the element, not the wavelength. The same exact thing exists where you can put these ions through a quadrupole, and a quadrupole is a magnetic detector, and it separates out the elements through their atomic weight, and it hits a detector, and they're all ordered like that too. So just like Alex has the 64 box of crayons back there, well, that's a perfect analogy because it's ordered color is ordered light. So these scientists who sit there and deny that this universe is created, at every level of science, we see order. We mapped the DNA and came out with order. I got my DNA ran, and it came back and told me, among other things, that I was lactose intolerant. Surprise! I knew that already. That's proof, right? How could it possibly know that? These DNA maps, it's amazing. So those who teach the world is made by accident betray their own scientific laws to believe these things. Belief is required based on creation. Whether it is from just a basic viewpoint that deer happen to live in certain atmospheres and certain environments, that alligators, well, I guess down south they do, but you know what I mean? Everything's kind of ordered out. And today we're looking at it 6,000, well, 5,700 years on, right? So it's kind of a mess because chaos does increase. But I bet you in the Garden of Eden, it was so perfectly ordered that there's no way that you could deny it. So now we're going to define miracles. And Pharaoh speaks to you, this is Exodus 7:9. When Pharaoh speaks to you, saying, work a miracle, then you shall say to Aaron, take your staff and throw it before Pharaoh, that it may become a serpent. And the word for miracle there is mopheth, which is a wonder, sign, miracle, portent, wonder, sign, token, a future event. But wait, just for John, now if Pharaoh should speak to you, saying, give us a sign or a wonder, then thou shalt say to thy brother Aaron, and thy rod cast it upon the ground before Pharaoh and his servants, they shall become a serpent. Now that's Simeon and Teros, which means signs and miracles. Okay, the same thing because we're using two different foundational texts this year, right? I put them both up there to show you that a miracle is what? Something that happens out of the natural order of things. We have a natural order of things. A miracle is something that comes about that is completely unexpected and completely inexplicable. Okay? The ancients thought lightning was a miracle, right? They thought the gods, the pantheon was upset with them, so they got lightning, and they had the transactional relationship, so they would perform some sacrifice to try to make the storm go away. Today we know that's just the difference of potential between 2 points in the air that creates the arc, because we're so much smarter, right? Not really. But things like being able to turn animals into inanimate objects or being able to tell the future is something that is out of the normal order of creation. Normal human beings cannot do such things. We cannot tell the future. We live within time, and we understand that Yahweh does not live within time. So for him, he's not telling us the future. He exists. So for him, there isn't a future or a past. He just is. So he can tell through his prophets what's going to happen, and they can say this such and such thing is going to happen. And then when it happens, then they're true. Well, it turns out Pharaoh had some priests of On who could do the same exact thing in certain cases. And the Egyptians believed in many gods, and if someone had the power to work miracles, it would be considered a prophet of their god or gods. And these signs would be interpreted as the will of the gods, or the person who could do the signs would have power over the people and leadership. It's a transactional thing. And so the miracle workers would often be regarded as having powers themselves, as if they were somehow divine. And so they would, you know, build works-based faith. And that's works-based faith. You show me, you give the oracle of, what is that oracle of Delphi? Yeah, you give them the gift, they look in their thing and they give you an answer. And this is the thing that it's forbidden for us to do this in the Torah, Not because it's impossible or fake, because it is possible. It is possible to use a witch to bring somebody up who to give you the right answer. And he always says, you don't do that. These things are forbidden, forbidden knowledge. And so these things are possible. But the faith of Abraham holds miracles in esteem, but views people who work them as servants of the Most High, never having power in and of themselves. When Yeshua healed people, he said, thank God for doing it. Give praise to his Father. When he resurrected Lazarus, he said, thank you, Father, for you have heard me. Always giving praise to the giver of life, the power. So Moses was pasturing the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of Elohim. The angel of Yahweh appeared to him in a blazing fire from the midst of a bush, and he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, yet the bush was not consumed. So Moses said, I better check this out. I must turn aside now and see this marvelous light, why this bush is not burned up. Flaming bush that doesn't burn up is what? A miracle. Unexpected, inexplicable. Normal order of creation, if you set wood on fire, wood turns into ash after emitting light and burning up. And Moses is trekking. Huh, what is that all about? He's a curious man. And he goes and he has a conversation. This is the difference between Yahweh's servants and the servants of the false gods. What Moses talks in this exchange that ensues, he's like, I know the bush is burning. I know I'm talking to the Most High, but I'm slow of speech. As if he didn't know that, right? Right? If, as if he didn't know the man that he created to be Moses, to walk among the Egyptians, to be educated in the house of Egypt, to be led to lead the people out. That's interesting, isn't it? When God's people get a vision or get visited by an angel or something huge happens, pretty often they have a conversation. Okay, so I'm going to put this fleece out, and if it's wet in the morning, then right, they're always having a conversation. Mary's is a great one where she's like, there's an angel, right? This angel in front of her, and she's like, well, how will I know this is gonna, she has a little bit of a talk back, but her reaction is one of the best in the Bible. The way she closes it is one of the absolute best ways. May it happen to your servant. Right? She doesn't have a long conversation. Moses had some sass in him. Moses talked back to Yahweh all the time. Okay, okay, okay. Right? I know you want to kill them all. Right? He's always intervening. Same with Abraham. And he's like, well, if okay, okay. I know if there's 10 righteous in the city, right? They have conversations. It's very intriguing. But the Exodus commences after this exchange, and we have the 10 plagues. Water turned to blood, frogs, gnats, flies, Egyptian livestock killed, and we should be dipping our fingers in wine right now, right? As we label them all off, or am I the only guy who keeps a Seder in here, right? Um, the livestock was sacred to the Egyptians. Remember how they wanted to go 3 days in the wilderness to sacrifice because the thing they were going to sacrifice would offend the Egyptians? Yahweh wiped out their sacrifice, wiped out their livestock. Hail that only hit the Egyptians when Goshen is spared. Locusts and darkness. These 9 built up the people to realize what was good for them. Transactional. This is transactional. Yahweh is scaring these people to death, bringing about all of these plagues and shattering the norm of Egypt and Goshen, this beautiful land with this life-giving river and a stable dynastic rulership that brings order to North Africa, right? Yahweh is disrupting the natural order of the world. And then we have the death of the firstborn. Only those who were in houses with the blood on the doorpost did not suffer this plague. Very transactional. A terrible miracle that did get everybody's attention, all the Hebrews and a good many of the mixed multitude. Because just like Rahab, sometimes these miracles and these awful things happen so that you believe because you want to save your own skin. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all. Just Bible says both love God and keep his commandments and fear God and keep his commandments. There's nothing wrong with wanting to save your own skin as long as it starts something. Don't live in that transactional phase. We have to transfer into the faith phase, which is why the miracles happen to get your attention. Yahweh brought Egypt to near ruin. Well, death of the firstborn, and then, yeah, to show the gods of Egypt weren't gods at all. Or alternately, as Tagore was just talking about, they were fallen angels who do have power, demons that do have power, but they don't have the power to thwart their creator, right? So sometimes false gods are just complete imaginations and made up. Other times, Tagore was just talking about why the people, I didn't even put two and two together until he said it, that the people were walking across the coals to emulate Satan before his fall. Wow. That's a really good one. Okay. As much as I looked at that, it never dawned on me before. So 70 people went into Egypt, 75 in Greek. I don't know why that there's an exchange rate there, but if you read the Septuagint, 75 went in, right? 2 million of a mixed multitude came out. But they had to be chased out, right? They had to be chased out. The second there was any adversity whatsoever, they have 10 plagues, firstborn dead. These guys are got their kneading bowls. They're on the road. They're on the way out. They see Pharaoh's army and they're like, we could have died back there, Moses, right? How do you not believe at that point that Yahweh didn't bring you out for a purpose? Because they're not denying Moses. They're denying Moses is God when they do that. The pillar of fire is right there. And it goes on to say that the pillar moved to be between the chosen people and Pharaoh's army so that they had time to get into the Red Sea when it was parted. So Yahweh even was bringing up the rear, right? Was protecting them through and through, and they're this immediate doubt. So as Pharaoh drew near, the sons of Israel looked, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them, and they became very frightened. So the sons of Israel cried out to Yahweh, and they said to Moses, is it because there were no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? Why have you dealt with us this way, bringing us out of Egypt? Is this not the word that we spoke to you in Egypt, saying, leave us alone that we may serve the Egyptians? For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than die in the wilderness. Is this not the biggest example of miracles not producing faith in the entire Bible right here? What more can he do? What more could he possibly do to make them believe? I don't know. They were ready to return to their slave masters. The people have just witnessed the 10 plagues, the parting of the seas. There's always a miraculous pillar of fire or cloud in front of them, and they still can't muster up the faith. They lament their previous lives are gone when it's clear that Yahweh is the true Elohim and the Egyptians are but dust. So this is Old Testament stuff, but doesn't it have the same exact application to our lives today? Right? What's going to happen to this generation when the Wi-Fi goes out? See, they wanted cucumbers. Our people need streaming services. Okay? They're going to crumble. And I'm a softie as well. don't have a, I've raised my children to be able to believe like us, but also have to be in this world because they have to make a living. They have to eat. They have to have a future so the lineage can carry on and the faith can stay here. So when the Messiah comes, when the Messiah returns, more accurately, they he will find faith. It gets worse. They get to Sinai, they hear the Ten Commandments from the very voice of Elohim himself. That when it says with the sound of a trumpet, it's this massive tumult that's coming out of Mount Sinai. Then they cry for Moses to be a mediator who obliges. Could you imagine how scared Moses must have been to have to march himself up that mountain to go face what just came out of Mount Sinai, right? He loved his countrymen enough to do that. And the Messiah loved mankind so much to be crucified for us all. How long was he gone before they broke the covenant? Was it even days? We still have the pillar of fire. These are still the only people on earth who have ever had a street light. They didn't have darkness. They had a cloud and then they had the pillar of fire. 24/7, complete acknowledgement that he's up there watching them. And with not even days where they're making a molten calf. And who's right along with them? The guy who threw the staff on the ground. Aaron is building the calf. The guy who was there for all 10 plagues has already given it up. The pattern continues. John 6:26-31, Yeshua answered them and said, truly, truly, I say to you, you seek me not because you saw signs, but because you ate the loaves and were filled. Do not work for the food which perishes, but for the food which endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give you, for on him the Father, God, has set his seal. Therefore they said to him, what shall we do so that we may work the works of God? Yeshua answered and said to them, this is the work of God, that you believe in him whom he sent. So they said to him, what then do you do for a sign that we may see and believe you? And what work do you perform? Our fathers ate the manna in the wilderness. As it is written, he gave them bread out of heaven to eat. Do you know what immediately preceded this? Do you know why they're talking to him? Because he fed them miraculously the day before. They woke up, he wasn't there, and they chased him down for more free food. And he said, you didn't seek me because you saw the signs, but because you ate the loaves. Transaction. They want the transaction. They want the free food. And people lament the sign of miracles today. We still have them. They're here. We've seen them. I'm sure you've seen them in your lives. We've witnessed the miracles. But for us, does it make our faith? No. We were faithful before we saw miracles, right? We were faithful. We asked for miracles and he gave them to us. And when we ask for healing and he doesn't give them, is our faith shaken? Or do we say, well, that was his will. There must be something here. We continue on. We put one foot in front of the other. We stay in faith. It was also mentioned the other day, Phil's not here, but when he talked about how he's over there. Sorry. Good. I'm glad you're here. He was saying that the comely ones should be the ones to get the gift. I could not possibly agree more. The gifts of the 12 apostles were not educated. They were commoners. And then we get to Paul, who was a hybrid, right? But people in New Testament believers look at Paul because he had every gift and think the pastor is supposed to have every gift. But that's not even what Paul said. Some are prophets, some are apostles, some are this, some are that. The miracles and the prophecies should be coming from where? Places we don't expect. What good would it be for me to get a prophecy? I put out a message every week that most people left swipe. People don't listen to that. I've been doing it for 20 years. People want to listen, listen. People who don't. It wouldn't make it, wouldn't go anywhere. The only reason for that to happen to me was so that people wouldn't listen to it, right? The messages, the prophecies, the miracles, these need to come from people who you least expect it for maximum impact. And it should, and the gifts are spread out in the New Testament assembly. They're not all required for one person. And this speaking and talking, it may look good today, but didn't the first 100 times, okay? This is a learned thing. And the studying is not, the studying was, I was raised with these things are true. I read the Bible and they're not. Well, how did that happen? So it was a process of learning. It wasn't the way that Peter was able to stand up to the Sanhedrin in Acts 4 and say, this is Jesus whom you crucified, whom God raised from the dead. Peter was, he was downloaded information, right? That's not how it came to me. I had to work at it. So when the miracles come, what happens? What do the people who know stuff do? We have to be there to go, okay, is what this person's saying line up with the Bible, right? You have to have people to evaluate it. You don't have people speak in tongues and nobody to interpret. You have to have a kind of a system in order to evaluate what's happening, right? That's what they say. They said, go look at the scribes and see if anything good comes out of Bethlehem, right? When they said when the prophet came, when Yeshua showed up on the scene, they go and they read. Yes, ma'am. Nazareth. That's all I say. You want real participation, just say something wrong, right? I'm doing pretty good though, right? It's first infraction, right? So the fact that we need miracles or we're going to get miracles, there's also another problem with that, is that the false prophets are going to be able to call down fire. We're going to have false prophets in the end times who have the powers of the prophets of old. So how do you evaluate that? Right? Are they doing it while eating a pork chop? Okay. Are they doing it while keeping Sunday holy? Are they doing it while telling you December 25th has something to do with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? You have to be able to evaluate, right? You have to evaluate what you're hearing and what you're seeing. And so the fact that somebody can do a miracle, not always going to be a good thing. The prophets of Egypt were able to reproduce some of those signs. And so to close, we have the scene with what's called Doubting Thomas. I prefer to refer to him as Jealous Thomas because he wasn't there when he shows up. And at the end of it, he says, you believe because you see. Blessed are those who believe without seeing. We haven't, we didn't witness those events. We believe them without seeing them. We believe the four gospels. We believe the New Testament. We believe it was accurately handed down over 1900 years so that prophecy can continue to unfold, that the plan of salvation has next steps. Next steps meaning the return of the Messiah, at the sound of a trumpet, the dead and Messiah rise first, and we who are alive will meet him in the air. And then we have Yom Kippur, a lot of speculation about what that one means. Then we have Sukkot, which kind of 1,000 years. I think the Sabbath actually references the 1,000 years better than Sukkot, years is 1,000 days. And then we have the end. We know these things are coming because we look forward to them. Therefore, comfort one another with these words, as Paul wrote. So we believe without seeing. That's a pretty good thing to do. Now, when we do get to have miracles and we do get to have the healings, we turn around and praise Yahweh for giving them to us. But that's all I have for today, and we're going to open it up for discussion. And Phil's got his hand up first.
I've told some people some of the stories that have happened to me that I've been allowed to witness. I didn't do anything. I'm just able to be there. You could verify it was true. And we've done this a couple times in a couple of the feasts, is we pass out 3x5 cards and ask each one to write something down on the 3x5 card, not that happened to their uncle or their daughter or to their brother, but to them.
Yeah.
That they could stand up and say, "This really happened. I was there. I know absolutely it happened. And I swear to it in a court of law, I get an affidavit and I sign my name. It's real." And then we take turns and share that. It is very powerful. It does build faith. The stories we're told about what happened to Israel build faith. The uh, the relevance and the reality of a providing God builds faith. But one story I have kind of puts it in perspective. I had a son that had open heart surgery at 6 days old,
Whoa.
and he had what they call transverse of the great vessels. That's where the aorta goes to the lungs, and the pulmonary artery goes to the body. The aorta side is the big side. It's high pressure, and it blows. It will destroy the baby's lungs. And the side that was supposed to go to the lungs is low pressure, so it doesn't quite pump enough blood, so the baby's blue all the time. It's a blue baby syndrome. So anyway, he had the surgery that went fine. Comes home and he gets RSV.
Hmm.
So he goes back in and he goes down hard, hard, very hard. Uh, he's intubated. He's they do everything they can. And one day they come to me while I was there at the hospital. They say, "Mr. Frankfurt, you need to go make plans."
Hmm.
The euphemism is for funeral plans. I said, "I've already got my plans, and this will be things will be in order." So I just prayed. I said, I can't fix this. This is it's above my pay grade. I don't know anything about this. I need your mercy. And I got a call from my friend of mine that was a lieutenant colonel. And he says, "Phil, come to the airport and pick me up." I said, "Frank, this isn't a good time. I'll call you a cab. I'll do whatever you need." But he said, "No, you have to come." Very persuasive man. I went to the airport. He did not know ahead of time anything about my son. And he said, "If your son dies, is the mercy of Christ still good enough for you?"
So he already knew.
And my answer is, "What else is there?" He says, "Right answer, take me to the hospital." And I'm shrugging my shoulders and kind of saying, what's this about?" And so he goes to the hospital and gets admitted into the neonatal intensive care. And my son's in one of those incubator crib thingies, and he's got so many tubes in him. There's about maybe 10 square inches of something that's not poked with a needle or something. And gets permission. He says, "Can I touch the baby?" And he gets permission. And so he turns his back to everybody, covers his face, says something. I don't know what he said. He says, "Take me back to the airport." I said, "Don't you have business to do? Why'd you come?" He says, "That was my business." And I'm still baffled. I don't know what's going on. So I take him to the airport, which is in St. Louis. It's about a 35, 40 minute drive back to the airport from the med center at WashU Children's Hospitals. And I get back and around his unit is lined with professionals, doctors, nurses, surgeons, everybody's lined up around him. And I said, it's one or two things. It's a really good thing or it's a really bad thing. But then they started patting each other on the back and kind of congratulating each other for what good job they did. Long story short, they have a thing where they have people that are in taking so many drugs and so much medical stuff, they have to take what's called a blood gas, where they measure everything. Because if they tweak something just a little bit off, that's the end of it. They had to take so many blood gases and turn the machines off so fast, they had to give him a unit of blood,
A baby.
the baby.
Yeah.
I didn't do anything. I didn't say the prayer. I didn't know anything was going to happen. It wasn't my faith. Is the mercy of Christ good enough? No matter what happens,
Yeah.
period. If the answer is no, then we deny him.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm nobody special, but I watched it happen, and I got 20 more stories, similar to that. It's not about me, but it happens.
All right. Amen. Amen.
There are experiences that many of us have had in life that we cannot explain, but it affects us in different ways. How it affects us uh, varies, but miracles that we've had as a result of answers to prayer. Uh, I know I'll give you an illustration of a fellow who gave testimony about what happened. He was in San Francisco in an area where uh, people were taking drugs and so forth. This particular man had relatives that were Seventh-day Adventists, but he was a non-believer. And he simply said, he was at the corner at downtown San Francisco, and he said, God, if you're real, give me a sign. Give me a sign to show that you're real. And he was sitting at the corner at a light, and a truck was driving by where he was standing at the corner. And as the truck went by, the driver, even though he had a green light, he slowed down and stopped. And he looked at this fellow, and he looked at him, and he stared at him for a while. And then he continued on going, even the light had been green all along. And so he said, why is he looking at me? And he looked at himself, and he was glowing all over.
Yeah.
He was glowing all over. And he said, well, I just asked for a sign. And all of a sudden, a miracle happened that caused that man to look at me, and he stopped his truck to stare at me. And then I looked at myself, and I'm glowing all over. And so he took that as a miracle, and he became a Christian as a result of that. He said, "Show me you're real," and he got that sign, and he believed. Now, I'm not trying to say that the sign forced him to believe. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is an event occurred that was inexplicable, an answer to what he requested. And he accepted that that only God could do that. And it was real. And
Yeah.
so that was his story of his conversion. Now, other people can multiply. I mean, Phil gave us a story that he just said. The room has a lot of echo back. So unless you listen very carefully, you may not get all the details. But Phil told me the story, and I know the man who came to pray for his son. I knew him because I had seen him sometime and at other occasions. But miracles do happen, and they do affect people. You take Gideon. Gideon was told by God, "You're a mighty warrior." but the man was timid.
Yep.
And he said, make the fleece dry, make the fleece wet on a different day. And it happened just the opposite. And so he believed. But he believed because he saw the miracle, but he had uh, a motivation to do things as a result. Now, people who are not motivated or are motivated, they're different. But they could still recognize the miracle is there, and it's up to them to decide whether they're going to act as a result of the miracle or not act as a result of the miracle. That's a personal decision. But the miracle does help the person to believe.
It gets
The
people's
miracle
attention.
aids the faith that a person develops from the miracle. And so miracles do play a role. I've had healings of myself, and I have to ask myself, why is my kidney not healed? I was healed in the past overnight, and I could go through a long discussion of exactly what happened, but that's not my point. My point is that you have a certain degree of motivation, and the motivation helps to produce faith, just as James said in chapter 2. And so my way of looking at this is, are you or are you not going to act as a result of a miracle?
Right.
But there's a motivation that's involved where you have your own part to do, but the actual miracle is performed by God, and it does have an effect on you and an effect on how you behave in the future and the faith you have.
All right, we've got Don and then Stan. Thanks for waiting online.
Okay. All the examples that Chris gave was the big public, large group miracles. You know, you're talking people who do believe, may not believe. These are large, visible miracles. The feeding of the 5,000. You know, what did Christ say the next time? When are you going to be back? No, you just want lunch,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
What we're hearing is personal examples of one-on-one relationship with your creator, with God. Now that's a little different. You've already established something, or God has already said, I want you. And he uses things in your life. That's a one-on-one. I mean, Bill was talking about 5 days. I was just born and my guts were upside down in knots and they cut me open right away. And my dad had no money. He said, do it. We'll figure it out. And someone came along and paid for half the surgery out of the blue. So, I mean, these things happen, but it's one-on-one. You already have a relationship. I think the example of these big major miracles don't produce faith. They may cause somebody to think, well, maybe I should look into this. It may catch them, but it doesn't bring on the faith right away. So I think that's the point. You can have these huge miracles. I mean, and nothing happens of it. 3 days later, nothing happens. But the miracle of the 10 lepers, 9 of them ran off. One came back and thought and thanked him. So the whole idea, I think the whole premise here is that you can have these huge miracles, you can have hundreds of thousands of people together, and it doesn't produce lasting faith. They feel good at the time. I mean, a couple days before Christ was crucified, they're throwing down palm branches. Oh, yeah, he's here, he's here. The next day, they're doing this. They're yelling, crucify him, crucify him. Where's the faith? You know? So I'm trying to phrase it. I think he's talking the big, humongous, massive miracle doesn't produce lasting faith. At least that's my take on it.
Yeah. Yeah. And the same as when the apostles went out with all those miracles, uh, it was to get people's attention, right? It was to get their attention for the teachings and for the stuff like that. And then from that, you get some sifting, right? So is the faith going to come from that? Of course, there are people. I mean, the person who said, "God, if you're real," pro he was already moving that way. right? You know what I mean? You wouldn't say that prayer if you weren't already moving that way, you know? So, but obviously, not to discount somebody's individual, calling or affirmation. If something happens positive in your life that's unexpected, that it's an affirmation. I just would illustrate that the times in the Bible where it turned into a transaction and that they wanted the miracles. They had to keep getting miracles. And then at what interval do you have to have another miracle to maintain your faith? I mean, how long can you go without one? Or like Elijah's case, imagine him standing up there on that mountain going, "Yep, I believe that this fire thing's going to happen." Right? You know, he believed it and then he got to see it. So, but anyway, I'm rambling. Next.
Stan?
You talked about, how long before you need another miracle. And I was just thinking about the example of Gideon. Now, the first thing he asked was that the fleece be wet and the earth be dry. And I don't want to judge Gideon because I may have done the very same thing. But then and I don't want to go so far as to say that was not enough for him because, again, I don't want to judge him. But then he asked for another miracle, although he did preface it in verse 39 with, "Let not your anger be hot against me." So maybe he suspected he was tempting the eternal. I don't know. And another thing I wanted to ask is, how do we know when we cross the line between simply asking for a sign, which I don't think is wrong of and by itself, but we cross the line and we actually tempt God, which Jesus said not to do? That can be a fine line, I'm guessing. How do we know when we've crossed that line? Did Gideon cross it by asking for a second miracle? I don't know. I'll stand by and listen.
Oh, you think I have that answer?
No, but Lorene does. No.
Anyway,
Well, Chris, I know I don't have it.
I I don't have it. Same with Jonah. Jonah didn't want to go preach. Jonah got spit up on the shore. And if you look at where the water is and where Nineveh is, okay, he had a long time to think about it on the way to Nineveh. Nineveh is an inland place, but even still, he didn't want to do it. He still didn't want to do it, and he sat under the thing, and he's like, fine, you know.
Yeah, not that I've tempted God at all. But you all kind of know my backstory. I'm sure he's worked through my life. There have been obvious moments and not so obvious moments until much later. Paul can tell you one where I was stepping off of a curb. We were leaving a conference and someone blew through a red light, and he said it was just like I was in slow motion. I then froze. Um, and then the car went by and then I fell forward. So that was other people witnessing. I didn't even know what happened. It was a miracle, obviously. The other is my journey um, to overcome cancer. And what was made clear to me with the small, still voice is got to meet me halfway. And, I don't want to turn this into a testimony of faith and miracles. I've got that in the parking lot, and we can talk around the bonfire, but all the things that we've seen and witnessed. Um, it didn't necessarily create faith, but it strengthened. Because I think there was a point in my life I was wavering, and I just needed a reminder.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, Ken, go ahead, and we'll have Phil after that.
Thank you, Lauren. I appreciate that. And that was the whole point of why I raised my hand. We weren't asking God to send us a miracle. I mean, we weren't tempting God. What we were doing is just praying for God to meet our need, and He brought us a miracle. And I can think of so many times in my life that's happened. And I just wanted to throw my hat and a ring. Thank you very much.
Okay, so that's Phil's probably gonna have the last comment before we finish up here. So, I'm sorry, Phil, and then all right, we got a couple in line here. So Phil, go ahead.
Yeah, a lot.
I'll try. I'll try to make this quick. Um, Gideon already believed.
Say what?
Gideon already believed. It wasn't. If this turns green, I'll believe. No, Gideon already had faith. He was asking for direction.